Hello and a good day to everyone. Today I would like to take you with me on a journey which starts on basic research for holistic sun protection and ends up with the discovery of the free radical threshold value, a new universal body constant. Every voyage starts with the first step. Our first step is a sunrise over Monaco at the Mediterranean Sea. The same wonderful, warm, romantic sun shines also 1,000 kilometers northeast at the shores of the Baltic Sea. Less romantic and much more scientifically expressed. Here is the well-known CIE 85 sunlight light spectrum, presenting the wavelengths of the sunlight touching the surface of the Earth at sea level. So we are exposed to wavelengths from UVB at 280 nanometers over visible light at 700 nanometers up to infrared at 2,400 nanometers. What does sunlight do to our skin? First, it makes us happy. It produces vitamin D. Different wavelengths of the sunlight penetrate to different depths in our skin. And the sunlight has evolutionarily created the different skin types. And last not least, it is also able to damage our skin and eyes. And very important for us, our discussion about sun protection is, it is lastly responsible for the epidemic rise of skin cancer. Yeah, obviously people in sunlight intense countries developed very early a true holistic behavior under the sun. They wear the right clothes, they stay out of the sun, they use parasol, and in Asian culture, white skin is desired. And what about Europe? We did very, very early already total protection against the sunlight. Already in 1912, Dr. Saalfeld from Berlin requested to wear ladies' hats and use towels of brown, yellow, or red color. Keep in mind our today's request to protect against visible light. These towels are in the colors of the visible light and filter visible light. So Dr. Saalfeld was far ahead of his time with his request. However, it seems that one day we lost our intelligent behavior and other values take over. To be tanned is till today a hot desire. Holiday, beach, suntan is still a mass phenomenon. Epidemic rise of skin cancer rates are not really present in public awareness. Holistic behavior is replaced by specific acting modern sunscreens. And overexposure leads to the ugly appearance which is shown here in this picture. Observation of the damaging light effects stimulated intense research. Early effects observed on mountain climbers led to focus on the UV light, especially in the UVB region between 280 and 320 nanometers. 75 years ago, the SPF value has been introduced, and nearly 50 years ago, along sunscreens needed only to protect against UVB, means protect against sunburn. And first, in the year 2006, the European Commission requested UVA protection. I think Dr. Stanzel will go in his lecture and talk about the whole history. But why the focus on UVB and UVA light? There are good reasons visible here in the action spectrum. In the UVB, there's the erythema and vitamin D formation. Non-melanoma skin cancer in UVA. The different mechanisms, UVB, direct DNA damage by light, UVA damage, DNA, and destructions done by free radicals, reactive oxygen species. This has been clarified and is the main reason for these skin cancer related effects. For us, the role of free radicals in UVA was the starting point for our research program. This is what we are know today about human life on Earth and free radicals. There are different sources, evolutionary sources for free radicals. The oxygen respiration, the natural environment, the background radiation. Every source creates in humans a mixture of reactive oxygen species like the hydroxyl anion and the LOS like lipid peroxide radicals. The connection between solar radiation and radical formation was partly known, especially in the UVA part. But the question was, which wavelengths of the total solar spectra are able to produce free radicals in human skin? This was still a terra incognita. In public opinion, often, also in advertising, free radicals are considered to be dangerous, and they are. You see DNA damage with lesion mutations, skin cancer, lipid peroxides, membrane damage, or degradation of matrix proteins. But this is only one part of the truth. We are children of free radicals. We need to have free radicals. And all metabolic biomolecular processes of life are based on a free radical chemistry. Free radicals have essential signaling and regulating functions. And as said, free radicals are beneficial and free radicals are destructive. But free radicals are only dangerous if in excess they overrun the control systems, the antioxidative system. And overrunning this control system, it leads to damage and a cascade of abnormal metabolic pathways. Our question was, which wavelengths of the sunlight reaching the surface of the Earth is able to create free radicals? Only the higher energetic part of the spectra? The only method to measure and quantify directly free radicals in the skin is the electron spin resonance method. we had access to a group able to do these experiments, and we did these experiments. We started with an equipment, as you see here in the slide, a little old-fashioned. But today, we have access, by the help of Professor Meinke at the Charité and Professor Lademann, to use state-of-the-art equipment to do further experiments. The principle of the measuring method is shown here. We used ex vivo skin biopsies. The irradiation source was a sun simulator. Spin threads has been used for determination of total free radical production. And the DMPO and DEPMPO spin traps could be used to differentiate between different types of free radicals, to differentiate between radical oxygen species and lipid peroxidation species. Most important, however, is the analysis of these ESR data allowed the quantification of the number of free radicals. So a radical generation according to the equation. A radical generation is a number x times 10 to the power of 12 radicals per milligram tissue. By means of these ESR measurements, we were able to determine for the first time worldwide, wavelengths by wavelengths, the number of free radicals from 280 nanometers in the UVB up to 700 nanometer at the end of the visible light to determine free radical creation. The result, every wavelength creates free radicals. The main part of the free radicals are created in the UVA, UVB area, and the rest in the visible light. These action spectra could be confirmed in 2015 by chemiluminescence measurements in the area between 400 and 7 nanometer by work of Rohr and Schrader. And one important information, I believe, is that this action spectrum exists in Germany as a DIN norm. Here we did another experiment. We exposed human skin to natural sun on a sunny day in Berlin. We used cut-off filter to cut away the UV light, and it could be shown that 53% of the total amount of free radicals which are created under these conditions are related to the visible light. So that is a very, very important result. In a limited number of experiments, we determined the free radical action spectrum for 3 different skin types: skin type 5, skin type 4, and skin type 2. Not surprising, best protection is done by skin type 5, followed by skin type 4, and the lowest and unbalanced protection is done by our European skin type 2. The measurement confirmed also the principal cause of the free radical action spectra. Here we have the same results in a little different presentation. The slide shows the total number of free radicals created. The reduction in creation of free radicals is from skin type 2 to skin type 4, roughly 2, 1.9. and compared between skin type 2 and skin type 5, the reduction factor was 2.6. The results show also the sensitivity of the ASR measurements and confirmed all what is known about self-protection capacity of different skin types. There was another question. We take the next step in our journey of today. We have determined the action spectrum for UV and visible light. What about the infrared? There's still an ongoing controversy. Beneficial or deleterious? We have asked only a very simple question. Does infrared create free radicals in human skin? We were able to create an experimental device which at the end of the day evidenced that infrared, and here especially near infrared between 700 and 1600 nanometer, produced free radicals in human skin biopsies. The device allowed to measure at constant temperature and a changing dose of infrared light, and allowed also to measure to keep the dose constant and change the skin temperature. Here's the results. Near infrared, independence of dose creates free radicals. At a constant temperature, the creation of free radicals follows the Bunsen-Roscoe law. However, at a constant dose, here the red circle at 70 joule per square centimeter, the same dose creates at different temperatures a different amount of free radicals. So our conclusion is near infrared creates at a defined dose and different temperatures different numbers of free radicals. See here a little more in detail. If we keep the dose constant and vary the temperature done by different distances between skin sample and surface of the lamp, we can see an increase of the free radical production depending on the increase of temperature. Similar as the fever curve, at 43 degrees Celsius, for instance, the excess of free radicals created reaches a value of roughly 30%. That means 30% of the free radicals are related to the increased temperature. Coming back to the slide from above, we filled the gap. Solar radiation is the first source of free radicals in humans, specific on human skin. All different evolutionary sources create an equal mixture of radical oxygen species and lipid peroxide oxygen species. And this at the same time. What is the conclusion of this finding? The human body has a free radical ground state. Again, 4 evolutionary sources: oxygen, respiration, background radiation, natural environment, and the sunlight generate a mixture, an equal mixture of primary reactive oxygen species and secondary lipid peroxide species. This essential mixture of ROS and LOS forms the free radical ground state. Free radical ground state will be held in balance or in a state of so-called redox homeostasis by a multi-level antioxidative regulation system. Free radical ground state is the precondition for all metabolic processes in our cells. But the unanswered question still is, when do free radicals become destructive? We started with the following hypothesis. Vitamin D formation is the only known process in human skin needing essentially solar radiation. That means any sunlight intervention on human skin up to the point necessary for vitamin D hypothesis, biosynthesis, should be healthy, because nature will not make an essential request and do at the same time very damaging actions. So what we did and we said is, we will take a standard vitamin D dose, which has been calculated to be optimal for different skin types. We take this dose, and what we were able, taking our action spectrum into account, is that we could calculate the number of free radicals which are created by the sunlight at the point where you have an optimal providing with vitamin D. We calculated also for this standard vitamin D dose a value of radical generation equal roughly 3.5 times 10 to the power of 12 radicals per milligram tissue. This relation of ROS and LOS already represents a surplus or excess of free radicals compared to the free radical ground state. The multi-level antioxidative and regulative system is here still able to adapt, compensate, and repair disturbances done by the excess free radicals above free round slit. We called this point free radical threshold value. To verify our hypothesis and the theoretical calculation of the existence of a free radical in human skin, we performed experiments with increasing doses on light on, again, skin biopsies. As an example is here the curve for the radiation with UV vis presented. The region of the free radical threshold value is here characterized by the change in the slope of the curve. The free radical threshold value could, in other experiments, also confirmed for the irradiation with UVB, UVA light, and for the irradiation with visible light alone. Resulting from the way the free radical threshold value has been confirmed experimentally, another question has to be answered. Which biophysical or biochemical process is behind the clear change of the slope of the dose generation dependency? We created a different amount of free radicals before and after the calculated and experimental verified free radical threshold value. We measured by ESR measurements the relation between the ROS and the LOS part at every radical generation point. And as you may see, before the free radical threshold value, the amount of ROS is always bigger than the LOS. And after the free radical threshold value, a change, the lipid peroxide products, lipid peroxide free radicals are higher in their amount as the radical oxygen species. So the turning point is at the threshold value, free radical threshold value. In 2020, this behavior could be confirmed by the group of Professor Meinke at the Charité on porcine skin. Extension of these experiments to an internal organ, porcine liver, showed the same principal behavior. At higher doses, after the free radical threshold value, the dynamic is determined by an excess of lipid peroxide products against radical oxygen species. From radical oxygen species, higher amounts than lipid peroxide species before the free radical threshold value, a switch happens to LOS bigger than ROS. Recently, this change could even be confirmed on pig's ears. Ladies and gentlemen, we gave evidence for the existence of the free radical threshold value in human skin and pig skin. The free radical threshold value exists in the inner organ, porcine liver, pig's ear. Therefore, taking into account the definition of free radical ground state, it is justified to claim for the free radical threshold value to be a universal body constant. Now, coming to the end of this presentation, at the beginning I proposed you to make me company on a scientific journey. The first part is done. Free radicals are created in our skin by every wavelength of sunlight. Holistic total light protection is necessary. UV protection stays as the basis of all artificial protective systems. The second part of this adventure has just started. This slide shows the draft of a universal valid concept for the action of free radicals in all organs of our body. This concept is a big step towards understanding an evolutionary working principle and understanding free radicals. One last remark. Human life is a unique evolutionary concept. It's based on oxygen, water, a constant pH 7.4, and a temperature of 37 degrees, and on solar irradiation. So, to all these constants, free radical ground state and free radical threshold value must be added. And finally, I would like to thank all of my colleagues who contributed to this work, but especially thanks to Professor Jürgen Lademann and Professor Martina Meinke. And thank you very much for listening. And please continue to accompany me on this journey. Thank you very much for your attention.